Most businesses celebrate the sale, but then they quietly lose the customer. Well, it's time to stop being such a statistic and do things differently. And Nigel Woodall is here to help us with this very important problem that's facing us. He's the author of After Sales Excellence, Driving Improvement, Customer Satisfaction, and Growth. And he has spent 45 years inside this very blind spot, the after sales problem. And he helps companies recover the revenue and the trust they didn't realize they were leaking. We're here on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank. We're brought to you by dfypodcast.com. We handle the podcast backend so you can focus on the conversation and the connections that grow your brand. So Mr. Nigel's here to help us to solve all kinds of problems, right? There's the quick fixes, there's getting the CRM in order, but there's also the proper training and the proper strategy. So it's such a nut to crack, but Nigel will help us get our heads on straight. So Mr. Nigel, nice to see you.
And you. Yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah,
happy to have you.
Looking forward to the chat.
Me too. And so speaking of looking forward to it, what do you think I left out of that introduction? What currently has you so just turned on, fired up, passionate?
I think it's that what you talked about there is the fact that so many organizations, they spend a lot of money. They put a lot of money into sales and marketing. They put a lot of money into their sales teams. Get out there. It's all about growth, the next new customer. And they don't put anywhere near as much effort into what do we do with a customer once we've won them. It's, we win and we move straight on to the next one. And so while they're sloshing all this money around on winning new customers, they've got this leaky bucket behind them, and their value is just draining away. And it's well known, it's proven that businesses will get more profit from existing customers, and it costs considerably more to bring new customers in than it does to keep the ones you've already got, because you've got the established relationships and the sales processes all going. So yeah, that's the one that always gets me going when I see this situation.
They call that the low-hanging fruit, don't they? That it's maybe more sexy and exciting to say, oh, let me go and grab some new customers. And you're saying, well, are you having that after-sales follow-up? Are you taking good care of them? And like, there's so many, I think we all have little stories like that, because it's rare, right? For someone to do a little bit of after-sales follow-up and stand out. Like I got married a bunch of years ago, and then someone that I paid money to sent like a card, like a greeting card and a business card. And I still think about that like 10 years later. And I had another guest on this podcast who he was all about like the handwritten like thank you cards. And I guess there was like some piano mover that he trained. And when the piano mover came in to like, move the piano, this card that he'd sent like 5 years ago was like sitting on top of the piano. So it's just like, you always hear little tidbits and you experience little tidbits, but if it's such a good idea and so simple to do, why is it not done more?
It's because businesses are set up to chase new sales, and they think that's the way to achieve growth, and they don't consider the fact that they are going to lose customers because they're focused on the new sales and not looking at what they've already got. And that's really, it's blind. It's an organizational blind spot, and I've seen it so many times. And having been a sales guy for a number of years, the pressure that the sales teams come under when things get tough, towards the end of the year, they get thrashed to bring in new sales, and you look back and you go, yeah, but the organization isn't performing, and we're losing customers faster than we're bringing them in. And it's that leaky bucket syndrome again. And it's demoralizing. It really is for the sales team to see that happening. Bringing in good customers. And the other thing is customers talk to each other as well. And you can have great products, great services, and in a marketplace, that'll get spread around. If you've got bad products, bad services, guess what happens? So there you are, you're out there as a sales guy, your bonus is dependent on you bringing in new customers, and you go and sit down with a guy and he says, well, that's all very interesting, but you know what I heard the other day? Your service sucks. So yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, it's such a short-sighted approach. And when we think about ourselves as customers in our personal lives, what do we want? We want to be treated well. We want good service. We want to be recognised that we're spending our money with a client, with a supplier, and a little recognition goes a long way. Just like those things you mentioned there.
Very nice. So you're saying that there's a lot of short-term thinking that just to meet those sales quotas, but then it eventually will catch up to you. And then when you get to that point where the bucket is leaking so much that it's, at what point is it no longer a bucket, right? If there's no bottom at all, is it just the tube at that point? And
Yeah.
and I know that for me, like when I was first building a business and developing like an email list, I would email like sometimes once a day, once a week. And when I had other friends who would also build email lists and they let it sit for like 6 months. And the next thing you know, when they go and try to talk to prospects, customers, they send that email blast, like half of it comes back bounced. And the ones that even still are there, they don't even remember who the business owner is. They don't click. But that's just from my own lens from just online business, that it's like your customer list dies just like any like an apple, right? It's sitting out. If you don't take care of it, you don't put it away in the fridge or eat it or grow more, then or take care of it, then it'll just wither away. But as far as the scale and the scope and the type of businesses that you work with, like what does after sales look like with the people you help?
So, I've been in B2B all my career. And I've been with small independent organizations and large international corporations. And at the end of the day, it comes that people buy from people, people sell to people, and it's relationship selling. That's the simplest way of putting it. And that again comes back to that building that empathy, making the customer feel like they're valued, treating them respectfully, listening. Just one of the main points, listening to what they have to say, and actually using it. If you think about, I don't know what it's like in the US, but over here, the funny thing is with the double glazing guys, they'll come around your house, try and sell you double glazing, and you'll tell them what you want, and you'll tell them what you're willing to pay and how you want it delivered and everything, and then they completely ignore it and they have a menu that they have to deliver, and they can't deviate from the menu, and you keep saying to them, yeah, but that's not what I asked for, and it's exactly that sort of principle. It's creating that meaningful discussion with a customer, not being on that I need to sell, sign here now immediately, I'll ring my boss, I'll get you a 50% discount. That's not going to work, not anymore. You've got to build that ground, do the legwork, do the hard work first with the customers. That's what brings you the reward in the long term.
Care, what a concept. And so it seems like that old-fashioned way you described, it seems like it's like making it hard on yourself the way that you describe it, right? If you go to someone and they say back to you, hey, here's what you told me, here's what I want, here's what I'm willing to pay, okay, let me give that to you. It seems more organic, it seems more doable versus like completely ignoring or trying to make something else work. And so like what led to writing this book? Was it like seeing it done incorrectly or the frustration? Because we all have ideas, but some of us don't have enough of the motivation to write a book. So like, was there anything that just made you so angry you had to write it, or what caused this?
Yeah, lots of things have made me angry enough to write it over the years, but no, it was to be honest, some colleagues of mine I think they were being pleasant when they said that I'm getting a bit older now and approaching the end of my career, and wouldn't it be a good idea to capture my experience before I disappeared? And so that sort of planted a seed, and I didn't really take it forward. And then I was working with some clients, and they said pretty much the same thing. And also they related the fact that they'd had difficulties in their business, and they'd thought, oh, I'll go and find a book. But the books they found, they were very academical. They weren't really accessible. The language used in them, they weren't easy to translate and apply to their businesses. So they said, hey, you deliver this stuff really well. So why don't you put it on paper and then we stop having to pay you and we could just read it instead. so, that was the sort of final prompt for it. Really was to try and get it down and produce something that was useful. SMEs, they have enough of a struggle. The big guys, they can afford the $1,000 a day consultants. The small guys can't, and so giving something back and helping these guys and just trying to open their eyes really, so that they can do some self-help before they need to start spending money on bringing people in.
Oh yeah, and that's a good way of putting it, right? So sometimes you get that foundation first, and then if you even do go and hire that $1,000 a day consultant, then you can say, well, now I'm educated about what he or she is doing because I've already read the amazing book by Mr. Nigel Woodall. And so when people get this book, which you say it's more accessible and it's not so stuffy and academic, which they might have seen in other books, is there anything in particular that you think maybe stands out about it? Like, is there anything that you think that you talk about with after sales that maybe other people don't as much?
So, yeah, most academic or most books on sales and service, they talk about how to do it. That's the starting point. How to do it. Oh yeah, you should use this model, and you layer this up, and then you do this, and then you do that. That's a fine and good approach. But talking to my clients, they've not found that so easy to get their heads around for the reasons I mentioned. And so I took a different approach. Was that I've seen during my career so many things that keep recurring, the errors, the bad things. Why not approach it from that angle? So that's how I wrote the book. So the book is focused on the most frequently recurring issues that SMEs have in their aftermarket, after sales, after the sale portfolio, what they do. So I'm trying to point out those flaws and help them to either identify them within their own businesses or avoid doing them in the first place.
Well, you're a salesperson, right? You solve problems instead of saying like, well, here are these problems I have, Nigel. And you say, oh, here's this amazing new system. You're saying, well, hey, here's how to solve these problems. And I think it seems like a lot more fun, right? Because if someone says, here's my framework, here's my steps, I have to do a lot of learning. But if you're pointing out some problems that maybe I didn't even know I was making, or I didn't even know it was that big a deal, but it was costing me sales, you can say, hey, here's some things you could try right now and fix up right now. Like, that's exciting, right? That's instant results. And you're British, and I know that your people love the self-deprecation as well, right? So when you kind of make fun of your past self or things you've seen, like, it can be a little entertaining in that way, I imagine. And so when you're pointing out some of these mistakes, like, is there one that you see a lot, or is there any like mistake that you feel is worth talking about here?
So yeah, I guess a frequent one is that is almost the leaky bucket syndrome again. So I've sort of forgotten the number of times I've sat with clients talking to them, and we talk about the sales process, and I say, well, how is that sales process working? And they're like, oh yeah, it's great. We get all these inquiries coming in, and then we get RFQs and RFPs, and we got emails stacked out every day. And I'm like, oh, okay, so how many do you get per day? And they're like, oh, hundreds. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So we're talking SMEs here. So there's only like 3 or 4 of you in the department. How do you cope with hundreds of inquiries a day then? And they're like, well, we do what we can do. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, we get in the morning and we start and we work down the list. Okay. And you get to the end of the day, and what happens to the list? Because have you done them all? Oh, no. We very rarely get to the bottom of the list. Okay. So what happens to those? Oh, well, we delete those. Okay. So here we are. We got the sales guys going out, selling your business, bringing in customer inquiries, and you're there deleting them and starting again the next day. So obviously you must be doing some sort of triage on those inquiries that are coming in. You know, which are the good ones, which are the, oh yeah, we know that customer, they're going to buy, or we've never heard of them, or you know, that one they're only price hunting. We always get price requests, they never buy anything. You know, how much of that do you do? Oh no, we don't do any of that. We just start at the top and work our way down, and we get as far as we can. That is a common theme, and it's the leaky bucket syndrome. It's not losing an existing customer. It's just losing a customer before you even started. It's the same principle.
Yeah. Yeah, not making the best use of your resources. Like it seems like they're doing great. They're making progress. They've gotten they've gotten this far, but there's if they look more at the big picture and like that, yeah, that's crazy that they would just if they didn't get to the leads that day, just delete them and there's more leads coming in tomorrow. And it's like I've always had experiences like that where I call around, I need to get sprinkler repair or get something done around the house, and it's like I'll call 10, 20 people, and I don't even really care who I get. I just want like the first one that replies if they seem okay. And I just call around and like most of them don't even call back, don't pick up. If I'm lucky, like there'll be those one or two that call back the next week. And then versus like there was my internet company, I needed to move my router like from upstairs to downstairs. It needed like a special plugging into the wall. And I just like I called and it was an AI chatbot, and I called in the evening and they were there the next morning. It's like, whoa, what a difference. And so I can imagine with what you see as far as there's the tools and the CRMs and the the cloud calling, it should be easier than ever to solve these problems that you describe, right? Like the technology exists. There's no more excuse.
Well, yeah, exactly. And interesting. One of the organisations I was with, they'd actually called me in and said, our sales are going great. Here's the graphs, and they were all heading in the right direction, and they're all pretty steep as well. So they were performing well on paper, and they called me in to look at the sales processes because they felt that there was some work that I could do there, and I discovered exactly this issue with them. And I sat down with the boss and I said, look, you told me your sales team was really clocking it and you only wanted some process work. I said, so, and your numbers are good, but what I found is that your numbers could be so much better than they are, because did you realize you're actually chucking in the bin every day customers who want to come and spend money with you? And he had no clue. So it was a lack of oversight, lack of attention to detail. And it comes back to that point, how much better could you be? Not really spending any more money, putting in some process, putting in some KPIs and taking a closer look at what you're doing, and potentially then justifying additional resource through the additional sales you're going to get from what you were previously tossing in the trash. So yeah, simple stuff.
Yeah, a reconfiguration, a different system and process and training for your people. And so this is fun to think of, that you can kind of see what's in place and what they've done and look at the numbers and look at the percentages and the conversions and the inputs and outputs. And you can say, hey, like there's a better way to do this and the most exciting part that you said there is like doesn't really require any additional money other than like the kind of the work to transition to that kind of new way of doing things. And so this is fascinating to talk about and think about, but there's not enough time to fit it all in. So in these final minutes of our discussion here, Mr. Nigel, do you think there might be a missing question that I should be asking you about your book, about your thinking, about what you've seen, anything like that? Is there a missing question that I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
So, some people will say, well, isn't after sales a niche? Isn't aftermarket a niche? And when I started writing the book, because I've always been in that aftermarket background, that's what I had in my head. The one thing I've realized now is that every business has an after the sale moment, the point at which the promises and the agreements and the commitments that you've made become a reality for the customer. And that is all after sales or aftermarket. So it's not a separate market niche. It is actually in every business, and so it is critically important when you consider we are all customers at some point in our lives, and all businesses want to grow, and this is basic stuff that they could be doing better and performing a lot better. Even the good ones, they could be performing better than they are, and the bad ones, well, there's so much more room for them to do better. So yeah, it's that particular area. I would say, isn't it a niche? No, it's not. It's not a niche.
Some people think it is, but it definitely shouldn't be, right? It should be built
No.
in, should be mainstream. And there's definitely value in what you said there in revisiting the fundamentals in order to improve. So like I know people that do like SEO, search engine optimization, and they go and they'll read the Wikipedia page about what it is, something they've done for 20 years, just to say like, okay, like let me go and revisit like what are the building blocks and the terms. And because I do this every day, but like what would someone see or question about if they were looking into this in the first time? Or like the coach John Wooden, he says at the beginning of like a basketball season, he says, hey, this is a basketball. Here are the rules of basketball. And he's teaching these guys that played basketball professionally their whole life. But he's saying like, hey, let's go back to the very beginning, because it just helps to get that basic reinforced knowledge. And if you're not careful, then you have these gaps and you take things for granted. And next thing you know, you're running one of these weird systems and you're losing the sale. You don't even know what's going on. So there's definitely the value in just revisiting the bare essentials and fixing up what's there. And sometimes like rebuilding the funnels or starting from scratch in order to get even further than you have so far, and finally stop struggling. So if someone says, man, this guy Nigel Woodall, where has he been my whole life? Where is this book? How do they know if they are a good fit to contact you and your consultancy, or a good fit for your book?
How do I know?
Yeah, like, oh, how do they know? Like, how do they know if they're the target customer demographic for this sort of thing?
So I focus on SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, and it's, I guess, most of my clients have a gut feeling that something isn't quite right. Some of them are very aware that something is wrong or something has happened that they want to fix, and it's very evident. But most of them, they've just got this gut feeling that maybe the business isn't performing as well as it could be. It's suboptimal, and therefore, how can I fix that? What is it? I'm not sure what it is. I need somebody to come and help me find it. And that could be just a brief conversation, a quick look round, or it could be, a longer engagement. But it's that realization. That's the way most of my clients come to it. They figure that something's not quite working as it should.
Ooh, that's interesting. So they know that something's off, but they haven't identified like the specific problem, or they don't know exactly which questions to ask. And that seems like they should talk with you and explain their situation. And you'll say, aha, well, based on what you said, we look into this, we look into that. And then that might lead to one of the various solutions that present themselves. And so there's two resources we have today. There's Aftermarket Advisory Consulting.org, and they build revenue protecting capability into SME customer operations. You can go there and there's a contact form at the bottom. You can get in touch, you can schedule a call. And because we want to make it easy, there's an email address, inquiries at aftermarketadvisoryconsulting.org. We'll leave that in the show notes. So if you say, I need to talk to Nigel Woodall and get this after sales process figured out, improve performance, execution, and organizational resilience, you can email inquiries at aftermarketadvisoryconsulting.org or at aftermarketadvisoryconsulting.org. There is a contact form right there. And Nigel says, if your organization is winning work but struggling to sustain margin, consistency, or retention, the issue is rarely effort. It is design, like we've been talking about in this conversation we're having, right? The configuration, the system that you have in place. So you can fill in that form. And then also the book that we've mentioned a few times here is called After Sales Excellence, Driving Improvement customer satisfaction and growth. And he tackles all kinds of issues like poor delivery, weak communication, misaligned incentives, under-designed service systems that frustrate customers, erode margins, undermine long-term competitiveness. So if you say, oh my gosh, Nigel is reading my private personal journal here, then you need to check out that book, After Sales Excellence, and that website, Aftermarket Advisory Consulting.org. So as we think about what Nigel said, and we're heading to those two resources, the book and the website, it's time for the scary part of the podcast, Mr. Nigel, where I try to stump you, I try to put you on the spot by asking you about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
So the quote would be, in B2B, it is quite simply, he who has the inventory has the sale. It's a really simple quote, but it is so damn true, particularly in businesses where they have maybe sub-tier customers. So if you talk about aerospace, customers need their parts quickly because they got people bums on seats in their planes who want to fly somewhere. They don't want to be delayed. So yeah, he who has the inventory has the sale. That's probably one of the best ones. And one of the things I found really useful, just one tip for people, is when you're going to do something with a customer for the first time, or release new product, release a new service, or make an offer, or maybe you're trying to sort out a problem, before you go back with the solution, take a look in there, from their perspective. Sit in their seat and look at what it is you're proposing and ask yourself, would you be satisfied with that response? And if your answer isn't immediately yes, you've probably got it wrong. And so you need to try again.
Empathy. What a concept.
Yeah.
Consider what it is like from their perspective. So as we think about those two lessons, he who has the inventory has the sale, and what would it be like from their perspective when they see your solution, see your proposal? Let's think about that as we go to aftermarketadvisoryconsulting.org, and also check out the very excellent book by Nigel Woodall on Amazon. We'll have a link in the show notes. It's called After Sales Excellence: Driving Improvement, Customer Satisfaction, and Growth. And you'll learn how to identify where value is leaking from your service system, align leadership decisions, structure, and incentives with customer outcomes, strengthen execution without simply adding cost, and most importantly, and best of all, turn after sales from a cost center into a growth engine. And you'll be excited and amazed, and you'll learn a lot by this very amazing book, After Sales Excellence by Nigel Woodall. And thanks, Mr. Nigel, for showing up, stopping by, delivering some amazing life lessons, business lessons, personal lessons. You're an amazing person. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Robert. Great to talk to you.